Well, I don't know if we're going to disagree on the second album, Matt. It's going to be my guess, but I don't like to assume. Let's run the numbers first,
All right. So
and I'll
yeah,
give you the floor. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think you got first take here with this one, John.
Okay.
So
Yep.
so yeah, this is the Replacements with their album "Pleased to Meet Me." Comes in at number 194 of the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 25 in 1987, number 1,222 of all time. It is the Replacements' third highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, behind Tim from 1985 and Let It Be from 1984, both records we covered in previous episodes. And the Replacements are ranked at number 160 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Gotcha. So it's just fascinating because this is considered to be sort of like, in some ways, the album where they're progressing to the mainstream, I guess, like making concessions to the mainstream in some ways.
Mm.
Um, I it's also they're a three piece here. We probably should mention that Bob Stinson's gone by this point.
And they didn't
So it's
replace
that
them for the they didn't replace that
they
replacement.
did not they so well they brought in Slim Dunlap was the guy who they brought in. How it's how I'll kind of go. So let me pull it up because I knew this, but let me go into it. So Pleased to Meet Me. It's recorded by the band as a trio.
Okay.
Stinson was a member when the demos were recorded. However, he only showed up for one recording session. The main sessions took place in November '86 and January 1987, and guitarist Bob Slim Dunlap joined the band soon after the recording
Okay.
sessions. So it looks like, yeah, they recorded this one as a three piece.
Got it.
Which is funny because unlike other times where, we just talked about that B-52s album where there's no Ricky Wilson anymore. So there's a guitarist, but it sounded different. It was not guitar driven, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, yes, I can tell they don't have him. This one doesn't jump out at you quite as much, like, oh, there's a missing guitarist in this
Mm-hmm.
or three piece. It in some ways it's different, and we'll talk about how, but in some ways it does sort of round out like a trilogy here, quite a bit. The Sire Records, the Tim and Let It Be combination, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
this, I think plays in that lane. I think what I noticed first off this one is the quality of songs on this album is fantastic. I mean, these songs are just well made. They are a much tighter band than they were certainly in the early days when they were sort of like a ramshackle punk band, and even compared to Let It Be and Tim, there's a cleanliness and a tightness, right? That they have just pulled it together. They're less jagged edges. There's a lot more aesthetic beauty, I'd say, on this album. Like songs like Nightclub Jitters and The Ledge are pretty songs. Can't Hardly Wait seems like it could be on Let It Be and Tim, and it feels like a refugee from those albums a little bit. And then in IOU and Alex Chilton, they're just real. They're a great way to start the album. They're resounding positive energy. They have a rock edge to them. They're kind of all of what makes the Replacements great. As usual, their lyrics are fantastic. I know that famously The Ledge was banned from MTV because it dealt with suicide.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a great song. It's the longest song on the album at 4:04, but it doesn't feel that long. It feels just the right length. Outside of that song, though, the next longest song is 3:31. So the Replacements have a great way of writing relatively short songs that sound more epic than you would think in terms of the gravity and maybe the weight of the songs. I really like this album. If you had asked me before we covered the Replacements, I would have definitely placed this album as a considerable step down from Tim and Let It Be, but I like it kind of. I even probably would have described it as a quote guilty pleasure. Um, I would elevate it from there after this one to right there with Tim and Let It Be in terms of enjoyment and craft. And it actually made me want to go back and listen to All Shook Down, the album where they supposedly had completed the sellout, right? If and I know this one was supposed to be where it, amongst the fans, right? Some people had said, "Oh, they're not there," and I know critics like this album, and people are like, "Oh, are the replacements kind of trying to make money now or clean up a little bit?" But this sort of was the closest I could see to, okay, this is the as good as Tim and Let It Be were, and trust me, they're going to be real high. And I might even say I like them a little bit better than this because of sort of the punk edge to it. This album was the saddest in some ways because I'm like, this is what could have been, kind of, because I listen to this album, I'm like, it's just remarkable that this album didn't sell 7 million copies. It seems like it was destined to have that type of effect, especially when you know how many albums, stuff in the early 90s that sounded a lot like this sold, right? So, I mean, a very clear thumbs up for me. The 3 of 3 and the third straight, just truly great album we covered. And Paul Westerberg is a songwriter, and the band, they just, as much as anybody, I'm reminded that they just have a special sauce for my ears
Mm-hmm.
that just combines so many things. And depending on the day when you get me, I think the Replacements are a top 5 band for me
Mm-hmm.
of all time. I mean, I'd have to. I know early that, and the depth, right? You have to see the depth because that's a part of what you analyze. But boy, it's like one of those baseball players, Matt, where it's like the career numbers and then the peak numbers. And they're looking at a Hall of Famer, right? And they're like, their career numbers may not be there, but boy, their peak was
Mm-hmm.
incredible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I view the Replacements as. Their
Yeah.
their peak is right up there with anybody for
Yeah.
me. So yeah, deep thumbs up for me on this one.
So that's interesting because obviously you're more familiar with the Replacements than I am and their history and everything like that. It's interesting for me to hear that this was this was considered their sellout record by many of their
No,
fans.
all shook down was the one that was really considered,
Okay.
where they like they and it was their own or excuse not all shook down was the next. It was I apologize. It was Don't Tell a Soul.
Don't Tell a Soul from
Don't Tell a
'89.
Soul and yeah, Don't Tell a Soul and All Shook Down were back to back years, right? And
Yes.
that was
Right.
when they signed the deal, right? They attempted to get played on the radio more. They
Okay.
attempted to, that was kind of like their grasp for, because really Bob Stinson was the guy who had the most issues with
I
them
was just gonna
trying to
say
be,
that's
yeah.
like Bob Stinson leaving probably allowed them to push that a little bit further into trying to be more mainstream if
Yeah,
that's what
I
they were
think
trying to
all of
do.
them had a difficult view of fame, right? Tommy Stinson and Paul Westberg and all of them. But like I think Bob Stinson was the guy who was most tied to this idea of like we don't do that, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think the others didn't have the barriers. They were never gonna truly do, I mean, it wasn't just Bob Stinson telling them to not make, to make a video where it's just a picture of a speaker, right? Like that was all of them, right? So they
Yeah.
had that in them, right?
Sure.
Like that,
Yeah.
and they all had the substance abuse and stuff. But I think the other ones were more open to the idea of going for it. But unfortunately, I think the sad thing kind of, and like I said, this is where I want to go back and listen to Don't Tell a Soul and All Shook Down, because the narrative is sort of like by the time they got there, the songs weren't there anymore,
Well.
right? But the
Yeah.
songs are there here.
No,
Yeah.
and that's yeah. So the idea that this might have been at one point in time for you a guilty pleasure is just that's baffling to me because it's just like this is it's a great record and yeah, it might. It, you could maybe say it doesn't have the maybe the punk edge as much as the two other records that Let It Be and certainly their what was their first album that they had Don't Sorry Ma Forgot to Take Out the Trash, right?
Well,
That's
there's Hoot
way
and Annie, and yeah,
yeah,
don't tell my,
so they
don't
had
tell my.
way more kind of like
Sorry, ma. Yeah.
right like stripped down raw punk type. So yeah, so there's some they've cleaned up some stuff here and there, but there's still edge and punk elements here. Shooting Dirty Pool, Nevermind, Valentine, Red Wine. I mean, a lot of these songs are just still really upbeat. Like I don't want to say they're aggressive, but they're there's still there's that edge there, and you got Westerberg's voice, which sounds just as good as it ever has. I love he's just got a great that raspy kind of rock yowl that he has is just I just love it. He fits this sound so well.
It
Uh,
evokes such feeling, doesn't it? There's
yeah,
just something, yeah, emotional resonance just
yep,
drips off his voice to
yep.
me.
Yep, and it's not a traditional voice. Some people might be like, well, he's not really, he's kind of like screaming or whatever, but it's like yeah, well, there's way more to it than just that, but it just fits in here so well. I like there is variety on here. I like the slowing down things with like the nightclub jitters is like this little jazzy, kind of break that they're taking, in between the sets. Skyways are really pretty. It's like a 12 string guitar. It sounds like he's playing there, just a quick little interlude. Um, and then you've got more of the commercially successful Alex Chilton and Can't Hardly Wait, which were songs that I was very familiar with, and still, I'm glad we got to cover them. I knew those
Which,
songs. I wasn't sure what album they were on, so when we did Let It Be, and actually I knew it wasn't on Let It Be. They weren't on Let It Be. I thought they might have been on Tim, and I was like, geez, they're not even on their albums that we're covering.
well,
you
and it's
know,
also to go full circle. Of course, Alex Chilton plays guitar on
yeah.
"Can't Hardly Wait," so
Yeah.
that's
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. So, but I really IOU is a great way to open up. There's great riffs on here. You're right. The fact that Bob Stinson's not on here, I knew he wasn't on here because I did the bio when we covered Let It Be, so I knew he was out by the time this record came out. But I don't feel like that absence is noticeable in terms of the guitar playing, and I don't know. Maybe other replacement heads will be able to say, "Oh no, it's easily discernible." For me, as a relatively new person to the band,
Well,
at
he
least
played
at this time,
sloppier a little bit, like
yeah,
in both by design, not in a bad way
right,
necessarily.
yeah,
But
and it
this
is,
is yeah.
and this is tight, right? It's a tighter record, but it's just, yeah, it's like very easy to get into if you like rock and roll, if you like, energy. If you like a little bit of edge, if you like melody, it's got all that stuff, and it's like, how can you not like this record? I really like The Ledge. That's probably the song that I didn't know on here, the one that I enjoyed the most. I love there's some sort of effect that they're doing with the guitar there that kind of adds a little bit of a layer to it. It does have a little bit of an 80s sheen to it, but I think it still sounds great. That's a great guitar solo
Yeah.
on
It's a
that.
top five replacement song for me.
Is
I
Yeah,
really like it. Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, I was listening. That's like, seems like a different type of guitar solo than maybe some of the other ones. It's a little bit more prominent, kind of up there. I hesitate to call it like a more of a metal guitar solo. It's not quite that, but in terms of the way that how prominent it is, and that it's kind of, they're kind of staying with that a little bit longer maybe than some of the other songs, or maybe it's just the effect that it's giving. But I really, that's a song that I really responded to the most of the songs that I didn't know. But yeah, man,
You know,
I'm
The Ledge was the opening single too, right? Alex Chilton was two, and Can't Hardly
oh,
Wait was
okay.
three.
No, I didn't
Hmm.
know that, but it doesn't
Yep.
surprise me that was a single. It's just yeah,
It
it's
was the lead
the
single.
lead single. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I don't remember ever hearing it before.
Well, that was because the video got banned from MTV.
Which
I
is
think
like,
so. Yeah.
yeah,
Remember, there were still things like playing videos, like music on the radio that was about suicide,
but did
was
they
still like a thing that people thought about,
But
right?
was it
So that
but did they ban it because of the song or because of the video? Like, was there something in the video that
it was
was
banned
too?
because the lyrical content was about suicide in the stuff that
But
I've read.
later on, they were able to play Jeremy.
Correct, but 1992 is a lot different
Yeah,
than
the 19.
1987.
Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
So
Doesn't
yeah,
seem like it should be, but it is. Hmm.
yeah, yeah. But no, but I this is a band that I'm gonna go back to. As opposed to, we were just talking about LL Cool J, which, like, I'm not gonna really go. This one I would absolutely go back to. I want to go back to their other records as well. This is one of my favorite. I don't want to say they were refined necessarily. I've been aware of the replacements for many years and some of their songs and stuff, but again, it's just never been. It's never been an act that I have
Did they
wanted.
move like S tier to you? Is that what happened in reviewing these things? They went from like I know I like these guys to like whoa, these
Yes.
guys are a top like a inner circle type band.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
There's definitely a higher level of appreciation. This is kind of like a Talking Heads is another example in the '80s. Another band that's kind of like that, where it's just like, damn, I'm really responding to this. So always loved Can't Hardly Wait. Alex Children. It's just, yeah. I think tight's a good word. It is. I will say that you're right, John. This is probably a tighter record than the other two, but it's by no means. I'm really struggling as to which one. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to all three, and as I try to determine which one I like better, because I know we're going to be doing the final episode soon. I would be shocked if I didn't have a replacements album on that list for me.
And we
So
haven't mentioned I don't know either, which is kind of a throwback to their earliest stuff. It's just this. It's sort of like a slacker anthem
It
in some
so is.
ways.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's great. And once again, it's like it's very like stereotype of Gen X,
Yeah.
sort of the like it just the throw off nature of the I don't know, but with this melody that's the melodies try hard, but the lyrics and the vocals are slacker, right? So I always enjoy the dichotomy of that. So and then it's got the sax, which you wouldn't think of
It's the
something. Yeah,
baritone sax too. It's
yeah,
like the deeper, raw. Yeah, it's very it's kind of a goofy song. And the first time I listened to it, my initial reaction was like, "Yeah, that's okay." And then
Oh no.
the second time I listened to it, I was like, "Oh no, this is really okay." Like I'm picking up
Well,
what they're doing here. So
and then it changes into that, one foot in the door, the other one in the gutter,
yes,
where it's like the tone changes kind of, and he sings it like more of a traditional replacement song,
right.
and then it goes right back into that like sort of chugging, lazy slacker thing with the urgency of, it's like low key slacker followed by like a chorus that just has tons of urgency,
Yeah.
right? And that's I appreciate the stuff they do like that. So
So the guy, I'm just saying this, the guy that played the baritone sax on I don't know, also plays the bass flute on the
mm,
ledge. I've never heard
wow.
of a bass flute before. I'm gonna have to see what that looks like. But he is a
Mm.
he's a guy named Teenage Steve Douglas, and he was a member of the Wrecking Crew.
Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
working with Phil Spector and Bob Dylan and Brian Wilson, and
Well,
yeah,
we know those dudes can play. I
yeah,
mean, everything they're on
yep.
works. So,
So, but yeah,
yeah, not just Phil Spector and Brian Wilson stuff. They're also doing like all the monkeys, like
yes,
all the catchy songs are them, right? So
yeah,
it's if you like them, you like them. So, yep.
no, for sure. But yeah, man, replacements, big thumbs up, great band.
Yeah, this one, yeah, this is just another heavy hitter. Like when we do our season wrap up in 2 weeks, barring anything unforeseen happening, there will be there will be a replacements presence
Yeah,
in my list. The question is just going to be who and where and what.
yeah,
So, yep. So not exactly a surprise that
no.
this one was the thumbs up both ways because I think that in the Venn diagram of Matt and my taste, what the replacements are is where the exact center of where we meet.
Yeah, we are.
The concentric circles, so to speak. The center of the concentric circles is probably this sound. So,
Yeah.